Imagine a picture. You suddenly open your eyes and realize that you are not in your cozy bed, but in the middle of an African savanna. There are endless expanses around you, and the air is filled with unfamiliar smells and sounds. You are completely naked. You have no idea where you are or how you got here. But the most important thing is that you have nothing. No matches, no knife, not even clothes. Only your modern brain, accustomed to the comfort of civilization and the wild, hostile world of the Paleolithic, where every rustle can portend deadly danger. For many of us, the Stone Age seems to be an era of romantic adventures, living in harmony with nature, where strong and brave hunters hunted mammoths with a single blow of a spear. Documentaries and books often paint a picture of the simple but rich life of our distant ancestors. We imagine ourselves to be adept trackers and skilled artisans, able to survive in any conditions, relying only on our own ingenuity. However, behind this attractive wrapper lies a harsh and ruthless reality. Life in the Paleolithic was a continuous struggle for survival, where every day could be the last. Modern science, based on the data of archaeology and anthropology, inexorably shows that our ancestors faced such difficulties that in a matter of hours would have broken the spirit and body of most modern people. Could you, a person of the modern 21st century, accustomed to the comforts of urban life, survive at least one day in this ancient and dangerous world? This project is feast designed to dispel romantic illusions and show how radically different our current realities are from the conditions in which the first people lived, and why your chance of survival without training and knowledge would be negligible. Life in the primeval savanna 50,000 years ago began with every minute vigilance, because the world around us was full of deadly dangers. One of the most significant threats was predators, which primitive people had to constantly deal with. The Paleolithic landscape was populated by formidable animals, such as spotted hyenas, whose packs could pose a serious threat even to adult hominins, especially to individuals or small groups. An even more terrifying opponent was the extinct short-faced hyena, Pachyrhinacuta. With its enormous size comparable to a lion and incredibly powerful jaws, it inspired fear in all living things. For primitive people, meeting such a giant left almost no chance of survival. In addition to these hyenas, other large carnivores such as lions, leopards, wild dogs, and other carnivores were a constant threat, and their presence always kept ancient humans on their toes. Survival in the Paleolithic period directly depended on the ability to recognize the danger in time. The ancestors had to be constantly in the lookout, keenly listening for the slightest changes in the sounds of nature, and looking for any suspicious movements. Their senses were incredibly sharp, and their knowledge of animal tracks and habits allowed them to avoid many deadly encounters. As noted by anthropologist Clint Janulis, the skills of tracking and understanding animal behavior were formed in hunter-gatherers from the earliest childhood, becoming an instinctive part of their existence. Evolution gave the first humans a keen sense of fear of predators, which was absolutely justified in a world where they were constantly in the role of potential prey. This sense of danger, reinforced by the experience of generations, allowed them to survive in conditions that today seem incredibly hostile. Every shadow, every broken twig, every bird call could carry a harbinger of a deadly threat, requiring primitive people to instantly assess the situation and make quick decisions for their own salvation. Survival in the harsh world of the Paleolithic Eno was largely determined not only by physical strength, but also by a deep understanding of the environment. Hunter-gatherers were an integral part of their world, and their lives were closely linked to the rhythms of nature. Their awareness of the environment was developed to an incredible level, which is in sharp contrast to the absent-mindedness and inattention of a modern person who is used to artificial lighting, constant noise, and virtual reality. Primitive people had an amazing ability to notice the smallest details. The trace of a broken branch, a barely discernible paw print on wet ground, the song of a particular bird. All this could carry important information about the presence of a predator, the direction of movement of the herd, or the approach of bad weather. Their ears were tuned to the subtlest nuances of forest sounds, allowing them to distinguish the safe rustle of leaves from the alarming growl or crunch of a broken bone. Knowing the tracks, sounds, and behavior of animals was a matter of life and death for them. They could tell the type of animal, its size, its sex, and even the time it had passed by just by following the trail. Modern humans, accustomed to relying on technology, have lost much of this fine-tuning of their senses. As anthropologist Clint Janulis aptly notes, the most lost skill for survival is not any single method or ancient craft, but instead the loss of a culturally and generationally developed subsistence pattern for a particular environment. Entire generations have passed on Ethan knowledge, forming a deep understanding of the interrelationships in nature, which is almost inaccessible to us today. The other most important skill that Stone Age people perfectly mastered, but which is almost completely lost to modern man, was the production of fire. Contrary to popular misconception, making a fire by rubbing two sticks together is not an easy task. This is a real art that requires a deep knowledge of the properties of various types of wood, the ability to choose the right tinder, highly flammable material, and the possession of a well-honed technique. It is necessary to take into account the humidity of the air, the pressure force, and the speed of rotation, and even under ideal conditions, success is not guaranteed on the first attempt. As anthropologist Brian Fagan notes, Ice Age humans developed advanced fire-making techniques, but without modern tools, mastering even the simplest of them is extremely difficult. Numerous modern experiments show that even experienced primal skill instructors often spend hours, and sometimes even days, to obtain the cherished flame in favorable conditions. Imagine how much harder this task becomes in a real survival situation, being hungry, cold, and surrounded by wild animals. Fire was not just a source of warmth, it provided protection from predators, allowed food to be cooked, making it more digestible and safe, and also illuminated the darkness of the night, driving away fears and giving a sense of security. In the Paleolithic world, the ability to produce and maintain fire was one of the key factors that determined the chances of survival. Even if primitive man managed to avoid immediate threats from predators and bad weather, he would inevitably be faced with the question of finding food and water. In contrast to the modern world, where food and water are available at any time, in the Paleolithic, their extraction was a complex and often dangerous task. Hunting in Hollywood movies is often portrayed as a kind of heroic, but rather simple activity. Throwing a spear, and now a mammoth falls at the feet of a brave hunter. In reality, hunting in the Stone Age required extensive knowledge, patience, incredible physical training, and, most importantly, effective weapons and coordinated actions. For a lone man with no spear, bow, or tyrrel, and no idea of the habits of wild animals or the terrain, the chances of getting big game were slim to none. It was necessary to know what animals live in this area, where they graze, how they move, when they have a breeding season and migration. It was necessary to be able to sneak up on prey, use natural shelters and camouflage. Archaeological finds, for example, in eastern France, indicate that hunting for large animals in the Paleolithic was often collective in nature. People formed groups, used fire and knowledge of the terrain to drive migrating herds of wild horses and reindeer into narrow valleys where they could be safely and relatively easily killed at close range. Such coordinated actions required complex social organization and the transfer of knowledge from generation to generation. A single modern person, even with theoretical knowledge, would hardly be able to repeat something like this. An equally important aspect of survival was gathering. Studies show that the diet of early hunter-gatherers was surprisingly diverse and included many plant species. However, determining which of them were edible and which were deadly required a deep knowledge of them, passed down by word of mouth, from parents to children. The slightest mistake could cost him his life. For example, the seeds of the attractive-looking jequirity plant, a jequirity contain one of the strongest known plant poisons, the protein abrin. One accidentally eaten seed can lead to a painful death. Scientists studying the remains of ancient people who lived in what is now Israel about 10,000 years ago have found evidence of eating up to 55 different plant species. This shows how well primitive people knew the flora around them and how skillfully they used its resources. A modern person accustomed to cultured products from the supermarket is absolutely defenseless in the face of this potential danger. Finally, the search for water is another urgent need, which was a serious problem in the Paleolithic. Clean drinking water was far from universally available, and primitive people had to have knowledge about where to look for sources, how to distinguish safe water from contaminated. Water bodies could be contaminated with pathogenic bacteria and parasites that can cause serious diseases and even death. Unlike modern humans, who were accustomed to running water and purified water, the Paleolithic dweller had to constantly assess the risks associated with each sip. The lack of elementary knowledge about hygiene and water disinfection methods made this aspect of survival extremely vulnerable to an untrained person. In addition to the obvious dangers of large predators and hostile food environments, primitive people were constantly threatened by invisible forces that could undermine their health and shorten their life expectancy. These hidden dangers included not only diseases and parasites, but also other factors that were invisible at first glance, but were of great importance for survival. As mentioned, the Paleolithic world was full of microscopic enemies. The lack of developed hygiene and basic sanitary standards created an ideal environment for the spread of pathogens. Drinking water from unverified sources, contact with unprocessed meat, and a lack of waste disposal methods contributed to the infection of various infections. Primitive people did not understand the causes of these diseases and did not have any means to combat them except for their own strong immunity, which, however, could not always cope with new or particularly aggressive pathogens. Genetic studies do indeed confirm that many diseases that are characteristic of modern humanity have their roots in the deep past. Our ancestors, who lived tens of thousands of years ago, already encountered various viruses and bacteria that could be transmitted through insect bites, dirty water, or contact with sick tribesmen or animals to meat. Analysis of ancient DNA allows us to identify traces of these microorganisms, reminding us that the fight against diseases has been an integral part of life since the advent of man. Parasites also played a significant role in the life of primitive people. Internal and external parasites could weaken the body, causing various diseases and making the person more vulnerable to other threats. Under-processed food, contact with animals, and lack of personal hygiene have all contributed to the spread of these invisible life mates. But other factors can also be attributed to the invisible threats of the Paleolithic. For example, the lack of a balanced diet could gradually undermine health. Although hunter-gatherer diets were often quite diverse, periods of silt starvation and lack of certain nutrients could also occur, weakening the body and making it more susceptible to disease. In addition, it is worth mentioning the hidden dangers of the environment. For example, some plants could be poisonous not only when eaten, but also when in contact with the skin, causing irritation and allergic reactions. Invisible spores of fungi or mold that lived in caves or forest floor could cause respiratory diseases. Even the bites of some seemingly harmless insects could lead to serious consequences due to venom or transmitted infections. Thus, the Paleolithic world was filled with not only obvious, but also hidden dangers that constantly threatened the life and health of primitive people. Their survival depended not only on their ability to hunt, build shelters, and make fire, but also on their ability to avoid these unseen enemies, something they had learned through generations of trial and error. In the harsh world of the Paleolithic, where wild laws of nature reigned, primitive people were constantly faced with the need to protect themselves from the merciless forces of nature. Unlike us, they did not have the opportunity to take shelter in warm homes, put on multi-layered clothing, or modern technologies to create a comfortable environment. The lack of basic protection from cold, heat, wind, and rain was one of the most serious threats to their survival. The scorching sun of the African savanna during the day could cause overheating and dehydration, especially during long marches in search of food or in pursuit of game. The lack of shade and light, breathable clothing made these hours extremely grueling and dangerous. As night fell, temperatures plummeted, and without warm clothing made from animal skins, people were at risk of hypothermia, especially the elderly and children. Strong winds could be bone-chilling, and sudden downpours could quickly drench the skin, which combined with the cold increased the risk of illness many times over. In the face of these natural disasters, primitive people were forced to find ways to protect themselves using the natural resources available to them. One of the first and most important steps was to use the skins of dead animals. After a successful hunt, the captured animal not only provided food, but also served as a source of material for creating primitive clothing. Skins dried in the sun and worked with stone scrapers became the first semblance of cloaks and capes that could protect from wind and cold. Over time, people have learned to sew together pieces of hide with animal tendons or strong plant fibers, creating more tightly fitting clothing, such as similar pants and jackets. In addition to hides, other natural materials were also used. In warmer regions, large plant leaves or loincloths woven from grass could be used as protection from the sun and light rain. In cold climates, people were looking for additional insulation, using animal fur, which had excellent thermal insulation properties. Along with clothing, primitive dwellings played an important role in protecting against the weather primitivni жилища. Initially, these may have been natural shelters, such as caves or overhanging rocks, which provided protection from wind and rain. Over time, humans have learned to build artificial shelters using tree branches, leaves, animal skins, and even the bones of large animals such as mammoths. These simple structures provided shelter from the weather, created a relatively safe space for rest and sleep, and also served as a base for hunting trips. Thus, in the absence of ready-made clothing and comfortable homes, primitive people showed incredible ingenuity and resourcefulness, using available natural materials to create means of protection against the merciless forces of nature. These first steps in the creation of clothing and housing have become a crucial stage in the struggle for human survival and adaptation to a wide variety of environmental conditions. So, having considered just a few of the many dangers and difficulties that awaited man in the Paleolithic, it becomes obvious that modern man, suddenly finding himself in those conditions, most likely would not have lived even 24 hours. The lack of basic knowledge about survival, the lack of preparation for encountering wildlife, the vulnerability to predators and invisible diseases, all this makes our chances negligible. Despite our advanced intelligence and accumulated scientific knowledge, we have lost touch with nature and have forgotten the skills that for thousands of years helped our ancestors not only survive, but also thrive. Their resilience and ingenuity in the struggle for existence are truly amazing. They learned how to make fire, build shelters, hunt wild animals, find edible plants, and face numerous dangers using only the most primitive tools and their own ingenuity. This thought experiment allows us to take a fresh look at the achievements of modern civilization. The benefits that we take for granted, warm clothing, safe housing, affordable food and water, advanced medicine, are the result of centuries of development and the work of countless generations. Remembering the hardships our ancestors faced should encourage us to appreciate our present and remember the incredible legacy they left us. The awareness of their struggle and triumph makes our own lives, despite all its difficulties, immeasurably more comfortable and safe.